Hey everyone, welcome back to the Betamax Rebel Outpost. So one of the problems facing the HF750 more and more these days, well, a common issue has always been the tray motor wearing out and not being able to close the tray fully flush to the panel. Because this motor works the hardest in the CX chassis, it tends to get noisier, and it'll still close the tray, but eventually it'll get to the point where the tray will stick out about 1/8 of an inch or so, and I've seen them as much as about 1/4 inch, and you'll have to push it in by hand, and that can become kind of frustrating because not only is the machine getting louder and louder as you're trying to use it, but then you'll have to deal with the problem of the tray not closing completely. So that was the case with this motor. Now the HF750, and I assume the HF950, it's the same machine really, one's PAL and one's NTSC. They use this motor, the RF280R, and I tried taking this one apart because it was getting a bit noisy, and it was sticking out, the tray was sticking out about 1/8 of an inch, so I had both problems. I tried taking it apart and seeing if I could fix it. I'm not sure if it's a bushing problem or the stator's just getting old, but when I put it back together, it was still doing the same thing. Here's the back of it right here. I tried straightening out the contacts. That didn't really work, so I just put it to the side for now. Now I have another HF750, and I tried using this motor assembly. Now this one does work perfectly fine, except for the fact that it is getting kind of noisy, and that's just not good. That's not going to work for me. I need it to be a quiet sounding tray. So I tested it out with this assembly, and it did work fine, but yeah, again, it's too noisy. So I looked around to try and see if I can replace it with one from a Sony SLV series VHS from the early 90s. Now it uses the RF270RH right here. I've got another one, this one right here. This is an RF270RH, and it did work, but again, it was loud. It's probably worn out because it's seen tons of usage, and the tray again was sticking out about 1/8 of an inch. So then I moved over to trying out, oh, one more thing I forgot to mention. The differences here on the RF280R from the HF750 and one that's very similar from the SLV series VHS is the HF750 motor has a plastic back cap, and the pinout is slightly arranged differently. As you can see here, the contacts here and the contact pins on the back are pointed differently on the VHS. So not a big deal, because all I had to do was make a couple of incisions on the backboard, and it wasn't too bad of a modification to get it to adapt. And another difference too is the screw holes are slightly different. They're in relatively the same position. The VHS motor will work, but the holes are slightly bigger on the VHS as compared to the HF750 version, and it uses slightly thinner hardware right here. Okay, so I'll come back to that later. Moving on, I did try using a motor, which was from a loading tray from a Toshiba VM415, and it has the exact same hardware and case style as the RF280R from the HF750. here's the plastic back cover. It's virtually identical. But again, the one from the Toshiba, this is from the mid-80s, and not only was it noisy, but it still wouldn't close the tray all the way, and I had the same problem, so I had to take that out. I was going to try using one here from an SL-330. Actually, we can try that right now. See if I can get a part number on it, see if it matches. And it's probably not, because it uses the larger screws compared to the one for the HF750. So it too is probably like the SLV VHS, the 70R, I'm assuming anyway. I'm not a DC motor expert, but you know, I'm researching every option I can to try and get my HF750 back up to par again. As you can see, the pinout is completely different, and I would have a really hard time trying to adapt this into the PCB that goes on the back. That looks like, well, the PCB is there. It's got some suppression components for to eliminate interference going into the rest of the set. It's just a couple of inductors and a couple of capacitors to shunt out the interference as this motor starts getting run. You don't want all that interference being generated from the motor to, you know, pass off into the electronics and show up into the picture. So I put that to the side for now. There are 280Rs on the internet for sale by various sellers. You can get them in 2-packs and 10 packs for about $25. But the pinout on the back, the contacts are set closer inward. I've got a couple of those on order, and I'm going to see if I can adapt that into the original PCB. But those are on order, and it's going to be several days before they arrive. And I got a feeling that it's going to be, the quality is not going to be very good, you know, considering where it's coming from, and they're in mass production, and they seem to be made mostly for like toys and shit like that. I even tried using a motor from an SLV-N700 from the 2000s. Now this was a really interesting result. The motor ran really quiet, but it had the same problem. The tray wouldn't close all the way. It was stuck out about 1/8 of an inch from being flush with the panel. And also a funny thing happened is that it runs very, very slowly. So it was kind of an interesting feature to see the tray load and unload much slower than the original intended design. And this here is an RF-370C. So I had to scrap that option. I don't want to modify the electronics in the set to make it run longer. I want to keep things as original as possible, and also I want a more practical option. So I got to thinking, well, I've got a UVW-1800. I've got a few Betacam SP parts VCRs that are laying around. Why not try to see if one of those would work? And sure enough, inside the UVW-1800 there was a Sanyo motor that runs the threading operation. But the only problem with it is that it has the same contact style as found in the SL-330 from the late 80s. So I came up with the idea of making a small modification and adapting the PCB on the tuner board. Okay, and so here's the Betacam motor installed, and as you can see, the back terminals are not going to adapt well to that PCB at all. So that was the reason for making these extension wires right here to go over to the PCB. Like that. Clean that up a little bit. And see, because these screws are slightly larger than the originals that go into the HF750, a slight modification is going to have to be done to the reinforcement bracket, or otherwise when you go and put it in, well, you'll see in a minute. As you can see, I've added 3 rubber feet as a standoff so that the PCB doesn't make contact with the PCB below it. Okay, we'll get this assembly installed. Like that. And yeah, see, if you tried doing this approach, just putting the bracket in as is, how the hell does this go? There it is. Okay. Yeah, you see that gets, oops. See, that gets hung up. So that corner right here is banging up against the screw right here. Okay, so put this back in. There, something like that. That should be fine. Okay. Perfect clearance now. Okay, I'll position the PCB accordingly. Just need to make a little spacer out of some of this black plastic here. And like I said, I have some 280R DC motors. I think they're 12 volt to 24 volt DC rated, and they're on the way. I'm going to try and see what the quality is like, if they're, you know, if they run loud, and if they do indeed operate correctly to close the tray all the way. And that will be in part 2. But for now, I got a feeling they're going to be cheap, low quality. The reason I like this is because it's from a Betacam SP, so you know that this is a high quality part made in Japan from back in the day. And I was fortunate enough to have a Betacam deck that had other problems. The motor itself right here, it works absolutely perfect, as I'm about to show. Okay, and so this is what I came up with. It's a little higher quality, it's a little heavier than the original RF 280R.